Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Dale Matthews. This is Inside News. And once again, tonight, we don't have Mike Jones with us, but he'll be here tomorrow. I just suffered a power hit here. I thought they were all over, but apparently not. And just before the show went on. And so, this material I had available for you, we're going to have it tomorrow night. And it still fits in with the theme that's over my shoulder, which is the chocolate croissant syndrome. You've heard it here before. So what I'm going to do instead tonight, it just is a little change of pace, is I'm going to talk about the most fascinating subject in the world, myself. No, but there are a couple of people who have found some of the stories I've told to be kind of amusing, and it's a lighthearted change of venue here from all the heavy stuff that we've got in the county. So I'll do the best that I can to keep you entertained. And if at some point you say I've heard these stories before or I'm not entertained, then turn the channel and find someplace else. It's okay. I just thought I'd fill you in a little bit about my background because it's easier to do that. No mic, no videotape, and I can carry on a conversation with myself quite easily. But it is a little easier if somebody else is here to bounce ideas off of, whether we agree with each other or not. Well, when I was, let's say, about 14, I was in high school and in about halfway through, and I was put into a science class of my own. I was a little ahead of some of the other students. I was interested in things like physics. And they said, why don't you just be in this little class and we'll give you a teacher to work with, and you'll find some of the answers to mysteries of the universe. And not so much, but I did end up with a grant that came in from the federal government to that high school, believe it or not, to study the effects of radiation, because I was a physics major, on chemical light. Well, I'd like to say it was a fantastic success and I made all kinds of discoveries as this kid, but I didn't, because we didn't have the kind of, let me double check, be sure you can hear me. Yes. We didn't have the kind of measuring instruments that could affect that could tell you what the results were. But they did kind of single me out and say, here, do this thing. And so that kind of set me apart from some of the other students in the class. Also, I was in my own class. I was a little younger than most of the other students around me. Okay, whatever. I found at the same time that I was interested in things like physics and because I had a double major, that I've already talked to you about that, physics and journalism, which is a little odd, but hopefully what it does is it makes it possible for me, boy, this is going to be a long night. It's possible for me to take something that's a little complex and explain it in everyday language, which is what we pay the commissioners to do for us. Anyway, I was working at the local television station about that time, pushing a broom around on a work study kind of thing, and also a camera, and learned a little bit about television production and the news especially. And then the local radio station came to the high school and said, we'd like somebody to do at least some half hour of high school news. And the principal said, here's your guy. And I started doing that. And then the other local radio station came in and said, we'd like to have that. And nobody else was interested. So I ended up doing that one too. So I was working and doing some articles for the local newspaper. So it kind of showed a trend there. But I was still pretty convinced that I was interested in going into physics. So I went to the local community college. Well, I'm saying I a lot, sorry. And it did fairly well, but I also got a chance to enroll in a journalism class. And so it was both of those. And I wanted to look a little bit into how the public relations operator at the college was doing in the community. And so he said, well, this is a Shangri-La situation. You've heard us say this on the show. So here's where all the little dots connect. and it's a Shangri-La situation here, and things are just ducky. Well, I went to the editor of the newspaper and I told him that, along with my pal, we were going to shoot a film about a Super 8 film. Remember that? About this public relations exercise. And he said, Shangri-La situation, you got to be kidding me. Well, what? I didn't know what he meant. He said, all right, that's enough. I just can't take it anymore. This guy is awful. And here's 11 reasons why. And we were fascinated because he had never said such a thing before that we knew of. And he just lit into this guy. Well, he's a fake and he's this and he's that and he does this and he doesn't do that. And he says he does this and that's all wrong. And we've looked into his background and, well, why didn't they do an article? Well, they didn't. So here they are confessing to these two junior college students. Well, we went back to the college and we produced our film and we showed it in class and the guy got fired. Well, that kind of experience might help shape some of where you're going to go because according to the newspaper publisher, editor, editor, not publisher, the guy was not telling the truth. And the college was very, very embarrassed. And we, through similar, just innocent questions, ended up breaking this story. Well, now, what kind of effect might that have potentially on your future? I got a chance to go off to school. I had a full ride scholarship. And while I was at the college, I also got a chance to go to the local university at the same time. I mean, after all, the state of California at that time was paying for my education because I had gotten really high grades, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so I thought, well, I'll just go to both of them. So I was taking full courses at both. That was a little bit unusual, and my major was a little unusual. And I thought, well, at the university, I'll concentrate on journalism, and here I'll concentrate on physics. And so I had a choice of where to get the final degree from, and I got it from the college, and then went off to San Francisco. At the time, I could have gone to USC to study film, or UCLA, study film. I was a little bit more interested in the electronic future of television. I had a feeling at that time, it's old news now, that we were going to see exactly what's happening on this show, which is the confluence of television and the internet, or they didn't have it at that time, but some kind of electronic version of what was going to happen in the future. And the idea would be that you could pull in information and pull in television all in the same place. And there's obviously a digital connection there, and all kinds of things are happening. And now that's also including that whole digital revolution is now also affecting filmmaking, of course. So in filmmaking, you end up working on a project for like a year and a half. In television, you end up working on many, many different projects, all kinds of things. And they usually last only a couple of months. So sometimes you're in charge of yourself and sometimes you're in charge of 30 people. And I found that to be somewhat challenging, and maybe more so than what I would in film, where and also it's very difficult in California to become a member of the union. Not that I have anything necessarily death threats against the union, or except they didn't want any new members. They said, oh, you're a talented kid, whatever, but we can't find work for the people we have now. So I wasn't going to be part of the union. And if you're not part of the union, you're not going to make any films. I found the same thing in television, but there were some more opportunities outside of the normal realm of things, and it wasn't quite as tight as it is today. Before I graduated, a couple of years before I graduated, I got a visit from some guys from Washington, D.C. And they said, well, we know about what happened with you in high school. Well, fortunately, it was a good thing. And when you graduate, if you're interested in coming on out to Washington, D.C., we may have some kind of work for you, really, as soon as you graduate. Of course, if you want to go on to your PhD or whatever, you can. And I had a scholarship where I could do so. I was getting a little bit tired of working for grades. So I wanted to actually do something besides just being tested constantly. Tested more on my own terms. So I thought, well, I'll go out for a summer and I'll see what kind of things they're talking about, because they didn't do a lot of talking about what they were doing. Well, I ended up working in a place where it serves us very well on this show, where I was doing a lot of trend analysis and pattern recognition. Some of it I can't talk about, but some that I can. I'll give you an example, and this is one of the few happier trend analysis and pattern recognition projects that I got put on, and it was only for a few weeks. But this certainly isn't anything classified or whatever. I was no spy. I was just looking at trends and stuff. And sometimes it'd be part of a team and sometimes totally by myself. And sometimes I would look at something that somebody else had already looked at and somebody else had already looked at, and then we compare notes, or somebody would compare notes for us, partly because they keep us separated from each other, and partly because somebody else is going to take the credit for it. That's okay, whatever. So I'm going to try to make it a little more interesting starting now, if I can. Sorry about the technicality of this. So I'm working for the government. And at one point, they were talking about the influence of communist China on Africa. Really? And they wanted to know what my opinion was, my lowly opinion, of what were some of the possibilities of why China was so interested in broadcasting, see the connection, in Africa. Really? Why would they want to do so? Well, I mean, it's part of making a profit, and it's part of which they were into at that time too, and part of power and etc. But what is it specifically that China would find so very attractive about being involved in broadcasting and giving advice, or buying stations, or setting up new stations to broadcast in Swahili? Why would they want to do so? So I offered my first easy opinion is, they wanted to influence the hearts and minds of people in Africa. Well, pretty obvious. And everybody else came up with that conclusion. And I said, there are also some things that are happening on a larger scale, or on a different scale, that we may not realize here. For example, one of the most popular shows in Africa, and it had been for a long time, with Johnny Carson. Really? And then later, Jay Leno. Jay Leno show. Especially the beginning part with the monologue. Now, that doesn't make any sense, because the monologue on the Jay Leno show was filled full of references to things like the 101 and the freeway backups, and the Hollywood stars, which of course they'd be interested in, although they hadn't seen most of those movies in Africa, and a lot of little inside snickering kind of references, and fun-filled references to things that were happening that were just, if not intensely LA and Hollywood, certainly American. And there'd be people in English-speaking countries that wouldn't understand any of the references occasionally. And here it was being translated into French a lot for Francophone Africa, and Swahili and Urdu for, not exactly in Africa, and other languages, and it was extremely popular. Well, what would account for the popularity of that show? Well, I posited that one of the reasons would be the same reason that you've seen many times. You watch this show, you'll make some kind of obscure joke, and sometimes people will laugh. In my case, sometimes they don't. And you realize probably at that moment, they don't understand that joke. But they're going to laugh anyway, because they want to be hip, or they want to be in, or they want to be whatever you call it these days. They want to show that they're part of what's going on around them. So, yeah, that's part of the reason. I mean, slapstick comedy in Africa is much more popular. Things like the Three Stooges, not because of the translation, because the translations are pretty good from what I've heard. That's just more, not across the board, not at universities, but in the general population. They're really kind of more interested in the Nigerian translation of Mr. Ed than they are in some real cerebral program which has, thoughts and things that they just haven't quite gotten into. That's not really fair, but I mean, more likely to go in that direction because while the French think they've got a better sense of humor than us, and we sometimes find the British sense of humor rather dry, in comparison with some of the broadcasts that were going on at that time, not all time, in Africa, ours were a little more cerebral. Okay. And also, enjoying an American program wasn't exactly going to make you popular with your fellow Middle East watchers of television. It was amazing that it was available to them at all. Middle East, Africa, and etc. So that was one of the reasons for this kind of appetite for watching the Jay Leno show. But where I really stood out to the people I was working with was when I said to them, one of the things I think is kind of interesting about this is the meta message, the bigger message that's being passed on to Africa from watching the Jay Leno show. This was just this one example. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean is you look around in Africa and the Middle East and everybody smokes all the time, constantly. As a matter of fact, the U.S. kind of insists on pressing that kind of stuff on a lot of the countries over there. And because there's a lot of big business to be made by tobacco manufacturers, which are not exactly the most popular people in America at this moment. But you watch the Jay Leno show, and nobody is smoking. Now, keep in mind, the most popular show in Africa, and nobody is smoking. It's the only television show that I knew of that was playing in the Middle East and Africa where nobody smokes. Okay, that's an interesting little meta message there to the world. But another thing that was even more fascinating to the people that I was working with was that women would come on the Jay Leno show and they would sit right next to Jay and he would treat them in exactly the same way as the men. Oh, really? Now, this was something much more shocking to Africa and the Middle East than the smoking part. Those two added together, it was revolutionary in a social way. Women were being treated as equals, not just stars, but they would have people come on that were scientists. Women scientists? Now, of course, we know this, but this is something that you don't see there a lot. And, well, of course, the women were appearing without head covering and all the rest of the stuff. And sometimes you wouldn't get a chance to see the show because the person would show up wearing something maybe a little abbreviated and the censors there didn't like it. But the thing that they could not hold back was the intellectual regard that Jay Leno especially had for his women guests. Trend analysis, pattern recognition. What is the bigger message here? What is the hidden message? As Marshall McLuhan said, the medium itself is the message. So I got a chance to work at Voice of America. Voice of America is your radio station is prohibited by Congress to play back in the U.S. because they didn't want a government radio station playing back to the U.S. telling you what is the latest propaganda. Thank you very much. We've got plenty of choices for that here locally. And so I worked mostly in French to Africa, English to Africa, Urdu to the Middle East, China, Russian language service. No, it doesn't mean I could speak all those languages. It means that I could get a basic understanding of what it was that they were talking about and follow along in the script, at least in Russian and definitely in French, and understand where they made little mistakes and stuff, and call that to their attention, which was part of my duties. And I would be involved in producing and writing shows of my own independently because I was an independent worker. Now, I could have joined the staff, but I saw what it was doing to the staff people there. They were burnouts. It was awful. And I was interested in actually making more money. You can make a lot more money as an independent contractor to them. And because you work in these, this is kind of technical, but because you work in these 4-hour time periods, you might do 2 shows in 4 hours or maybe just 1. But you were paid for those 4 hours. So there were lots of times when I slept on the floor and then would get up at 2 o'clock for a 3 a.m. show to China or something, and then I could go home. Or maybe just stay there for 24 hours. Plenty of times I was there for 24 hours, as long as there was some little cubby where I could sleep. And I was making some pretty good money, yeah, in a variety of languages. And they told me at the time, I can't prove this, here's a document showing it, but that I was working in more language services than anyone else ever had. Okay, but I was a capitalist. I was interested. And also it was kind of interesting to me to share, a 2 o'clock meal with the Russians who put dill on their ice cream. Everything had dill in it. They were very, very friendly to me. Some of the language service people were not at all friendly. Some of the French people, especially, they despised it if you tried to speak their language. But if you had no matter how good you were or bad you were, I don't know what I was. But the people from Iran, the Persians, you even try to speak their language and they just throw their arms around you and they love you, right? And so there were a lot of strange adventures with people with different values. Like I was working with the Nigerians one time, and they said, they got me on the little intercom and they said, while that tape is playing, it looks like we've got more news than we have time. Okay. But see, at a certain point, you have to stop because some other language service takes over. And so if you're doing this in some language that's going to Nigeria, the next person on might be something that's going to another part of the country in Portuguese. And so they said, well, can you get us more time? And I said, no, I won't be able to do that because the time is finite. It's just so much of it. Well, will you try? Well, see, I already knew what the answer was. And I guess apparently the guy that normally worked with them would get on the phone and go, and he wasn't talking to anybody because they would have laughed him out of the room. And they were a little upset for me for not trying to get them more time. They had never gotten more time, not ever. But they wanted me to try to get them more time. And so, yeah, well, can't you pretend? And I was having a little trouble pretending about that kind of stuff. I mean, it seemed slightly dishonest to me, though I can see some value in the public relations aspect of it. Hey, so I didn't make a big hit with them on not even trying to get them more time. My biggest challenge with a language service came when I was working with the Chinese service. And there's no proof that any of this ever happened. And where's the documentation? There isn't any, okay? But you're going to understand why. So I'm working with the Chinese, and I can follow along just enough to understand when it's supposed to be news, when it's supposed to be music. If it's kind of a variety show, they'll play a little music in Chinese, a little bit of American music, maybe even swing music. Very, very odd way of requesting songs that they would send a letter. Hey, and so here you are broadcasting on shortwave radio, and then they send you a letter. And in about 6 weeks, you get the letter and says, would you play that song again? Very strange kind of way of requesting songs, to me, anyway. So I'm working with the Chinese service, and the head of the Chinese service comes to me and he says, we're supposed to be doing a certain amount. This is where the big turning point came for me in Washington, D.C. I was working on other projects that we're not going to talk about here. But I also was working at Voice of America at very odd hours. Okay. And he came to me and he said, we're supposed to be doing a certain amount of news, a certain percentage. I said, yes, I'm aware of that. He said, you're the producer of the show. I said, yes, I am. But they have to get a chance to do what they want to do. And so I point out to them that it's time for the news, and they just want to sit back and smoke awful Chinese cigarettes and let more music play. He says, well, we have to get onto the record that we're doing more news. I said, okay, easily solved. All you need to do is just tell them, when your producer, me, says to you, we need to do the news now, do the news now. He said, well, that's very difficult sometimes. I'm sure that it is. And he said, I tell you what, why don't you just change the record to reflect that we did do the news? I said, well, now I can't do that, but I certainly could help. Wait a minute. What do you mean you can't do that? Well, because we didn't. Yeah, but I'm telling you it's okay if you sign your name to it saying that we did. I said, no, I won't be able to do that because that would not be the truth. Now, that doesn't make me the world's most honest person, but it does mean I'm not going to falsify government documents. Well, he wasn't very happy with me, this head of the Chinese service. And he said, well, you're not being a team player. My answer to him could have been more diplomatic. I said, no, I cannot be part of that kind of team. But I'd be happy to help them get into compliance. Well, why don't you put your name on it? I said, no, I can't put my name on it, but you could put yours. He said, no, I can't put mine. I'm not the producer. I said, I am not going to be putting my name on a government document saying that you did this when you didn't. I worked at Voice of America for another couple of weeks. One of the funny things I think that happened with the Chinese was that they'd put out these big reels of tape. Yeah, it was tape. And when they were done, they'd roll it off in a certain direction, and then they would give it to the engineering staff that would play it super early in the morning. They learned after about 5 weeks of doing this, they were getting these complaints from the Chinese government, specifically from the Chinese army. And they were very upset that we were sending coded messages to people in China. Really? Well, it turns out that for all those weeks, all those productions, that they were sending out hours and hours and hours of backwards Chinese programming because the engineering staff didn't know to flip it over. Not only did that cause some international consternation about the coded messages, it also was, what a tremendous, you can figure in 5 weeks, that's a lot of shows and so much content. Anyway, so I wasn't going to be working there anymore. So keeping in mind, I was doing trend analysis, pattern recognition for the other folks. And I gave you an example of that. One of the things that was really popular at that time, especially in areas like the energy department, was something called an inference engine. It's kind of old now, but an inference engine was something that was supposed to help you make decisions, especially in an emergency situation, that would be based on expert input into a computer program. And personal computers were a little new at that time. And so the idea that each person would have a computer on their desk that was separated from a main computer downstairs was relatively new. And still there was only a partial transfer from one thing to another. But what everybody wanted was the ability to make expert decisions based on the advice of experts that weren't actually there. And this is what came from an inference engine. Now, there's the term garbage in, garbage out, GIGO. And the idea there is if you don't put in good advice into the expert engine, into the inference engine, you're going to get bad advice out. Garbage in, garbage out. So the idea was that they would posit these certain scenarios and say, well, what would be your percentage of confidence that doing X, Y, or Z would be the right thing? And they would build this into this program. And so you would be faced with that situation like the main core is burning down. We're losing water. This process is venting steam, radioactive steam. And therefore, what is the best course of action to take? 1, don't worry about it. 2, run for your life. 3, prepare a new resume. Not that simple, obviously, but the kind of work I was doing, I can't really talk about all of that. But inference engine was something that was a hot term at the time. And lots of people were having trouble getting past all the numbers. Now, there's plenty of people out in our audience that, or not in our audience, that don't watch this show because they don't process information as well through a television connection as they do through reading a newspaper, even if it's a Daily Courier, because it's not going to be there. Okay, yes, but they need that in writing. Okay, plenty of people like that. There are others that learn more from looking at a string of numbers. That's not exactly me, although I've had some training in that. But there are even more who can immediately tell what time it is by looking at 2 hands on a clock, while they're not as good at reading digital readout. Isn't that strange? But there are plenty of people who fall into that category, and they have a better feeling for it if it's, Grandpa, what does clockwise mean? Right. What are shoelaces? Right. And so there are plenty of people who do better graphically. And so there was this movement to take this inference engine, or various permutations of that, and make it into a graphical representation, which many people found easier. And you'll know immediately what I'm talking about when I say dashboard of your car. The dashboard of your car could obviously be made of just a string of numbers, and maybe a little separation between them. That'd be plenty. But there are plenty of people, there are even more people who learn more or understand more about what's happening on the dashboard of their car if they see this thing that's moving across and moving into the red, or this one that's going down to almost nothing. They just get a better feeling for it because they're more graphically oriented. Well, this was a period of time where just a few years before, believe it or not, Microsoft was saying, you don't have to mouse around or fool around with our computers because we don't have that stupid thing called a mouse attached to a computer. That was Microsoft at that time, because their big influence was Apple. And Apple brought out the graphical user interface, GUI, graphical user interface. And there were lots of people saying, we don't need that. Why, we've got a flickering amber screen, or we've got a flickering, this was well before this is what I'm talking about, but this was an outgrowth of that. And so they wanted people, the hottest commodity out there at that time was a graphical genius that knew something about inference engines. I'm not a graphical genius, but I signed on with this outfit that was serving all kinds of government agencies, lots of, and especially K Street advisors to politicians, and especially all the little companies that had sprung up all over the place to develop technology for the government. And there was plenty of them. And they all wanted someone to come in and help them with their graphical user interface, and especially work with them on the inference engine and its graphical equivalent. So I didn't know this, but I was being sold because I said, yeah, I'm interested in working. I was being sold to various firms for a couple of days, a week. I think the longest one was like 6 weeks as a graphical genius. Oh, please. But that was the marketing. They were selling my services for at least $2,000 a day, and I was making $1,000 from that. Some of them I know were selling it for more than that, but I was making about $1,000 a day. And I would work for a few days and be off for a few days and work for a few weeks at some place and then off for 30 days was the longest I ever went without work in Washington, D.C. You don't need to be a member of a union. And if they think that you're a hot commodity, really, please, graphical genius. Well, not a graphical genius, but that's what they, so, but I looked like one once. I remember walking in the door of this outfit, and at the moment, everybody was switching over to really, really large monitors. Not the monitor that you may have, but like monitors that were like this big, really huge monitors. And I remember this one outfit that I was working for, and they said, can you come in and help us set up our really big monitors? It was plug and play. I mean, you just take this and plug it in there, and you got a really huge monitor. But they wanted to be sure that it was working with their inference engine. And the inference engines at that time were so big that you had to scroll to get up to one area or down to another or whatever. So they wanted the biggest screen they could get. They still had to scroll all over the place for these graphical user interface ways of explaining to you what should you do. And they had the typical diagrams that if this, then that, and if that, then this. And you had to follow these things around. And many people found it easier to follow the arrows. Okay. So I walk in and I set up there. They said, we're having some people come over in 2 days, and we want them to see what you've set up for us about our inference engines and with these big monitors, because we want to impress them, because we think we're going to get a contract with that. It was for the Department of Energy, as a matter of fact. They were right across the street from them. And so I set up the big monitors, and I put several of them in the room, and I set up an inference engine on each of them, and I put some bars, bar chart on another one. So that after a couple of days, they walk in with these. Now they're walking in with the IT department, which is similar in sophistication, or, well, maybe not really high sophistication, but to our IT department in the county. Some very lovely people there, some people who aren't so lovely. But they walked in and they saw these big monitors, and they came around and they were rushing around the corner to see the face of these big monitors with these inference engines on them. He said, gosh, such powerful computers. Of course, I didn't put my head in my hands, but these are computer guys. And they're saying these big monitors equal a powerful computer. No, they don't. They're simply big monitors. But they convinced themselves that that's what it meant. Well, the guys that had called me in were very, very pleased. Graphical genius. No, I'm not. I'm not going to talk them out of it. Are you crazy? So, yeah, well, that was worth every penny. Well, I was there for 3 days. I made $3,000. Okay. No buyer's remorse there. They were convinced that that was expert advice. It was just a big monitor. Whatever. And I wasn't cheating the government now. I wasn't really cheating anybody. They got what they wanted. They got exactly what they wanted. These are people who are going to turn around and bill the government for other things. Sometimes the people I was working with were not the sharpest. For example, there was a firm that had gotten a contract just before I had arrived, and they had inherited some equipment. I'm sorry this is in little bits and pieces, but I'm hoping you'll find some of this a little bit entertaining, a little lighter fare. And they had inherited some equipment. I'd been doing all kinds of work for them. They were very, very pleased with my work. And at one point I said to them, you have 2 state-of-the-art gas chromatographs. What? And I said, you have two of these. You've inherited them from your predecessors. Oh, well, okay, that's great. Now, these weren't just your normal gas chromatographs where you take a substance and you burn it, and it will tell you the components inside of it. These were super duper kind. I mean, these were really super expensive kind. It's the kind of thing that you do if you want to make apple pie that tastes like super apple pie. You isolate, I'm being a little simplistic here, but you isolate the stuff that makes it taste appley, and you double or triple that, and you're going to have a pretty good tasting apple pie, buddy. It's the kind of thing that could be used for reverse engineering, which is very popular, and was the kind of thing that revealed that the reason that McDonald's fries are so popular worldwide is because there's sugar in them. Really? Yes, there's sugar in McDonald's fries. Well, that goes a little bit to explaining why they're so popular, but you don't know that unless you're doing reverse engineering. There was an outfit that was selling a deep dish Italian pizza in Washington, D.C. that was extremely popular, and they had gone all the way out to the Midwest, and they'd gone through the garbage of, and I think they bought some too, of a super popular deep dish Italian pizza place there, brought them back to Washington, D.C., and put them into a gas chromatograph, which helped identify not all of the process, but some of the components. Gas chromatograph is a super tool and very highly in demand. And these guys had two of them that were still in their crates. And I said, well, I tell you what, and that just refers to the thing over my shoulder about chocolate croissants. I'm going to end with that. You've already heard that story. And I said, why don't you let me, because you trust me. Yes, we trust you. You're a graphical genius. Yeah, okay. And I never put them off. I always, yes, you're right, but not for the government. And so I said, why don't you just let me get my hands on these things, and you can watch every step of the process. I will rent them out, and I'll give you half of the money. Right now, they're simply sitting in storage. If you let me have them, let me borrow them, let me use them, I will rent them out. I will give you half of the product, half of the receipts. You have to do nothing. I would probably be looking at, with those two and the sophistication they had at the moment, $5,000 a week. They decided in their wisdom to keep them boxed up. Still are boxed up as far as I know. They just, I mean, but when I talked with my main contact there, I said, look, nicely, your main purpose is to make a profit, right? So if you've got something boxed up somewhere, if it's a llama or a gas chromatograph, what do you care? As long as you're making money from it. Right now, it's making nothing. Just, you trust me? Yes, we do. But we just can't quite see how. I said, you know, honestly, you don't even need to see how. I mean, if I take it to the Smithsonian Institution and they pay me just to put it on display, what do you care? You're making nothing off of it right now. Would you please see how this relates to local government politics, etc.? Please let me do this thing and make something out of it. No, wasn't going to happen. Hey, okay. Well, isn't that great? Okay, so I went into another place, and they wanted me to come in just for a day. They needed they needed a graphics genius. And I walk in the door, and I haven't even gotten back to the area where I'm supposed to be genius. And I first walk in the door, and they had just gotten a bunch of big monitors. Guess what? And they were mostly doing work with inference engines. And they had a whole room of the prettiest young ladies I had ever seen. Now I know where they lock them up all day. And I walked in, and as soon as I walked in the door, the main lady that was in charge of all these young ladies said, "Oh, good. Our graphic genius is here." Oh. And I always try never to do this kind of thing. No, just take it as it is. Okay. And everybody stops and they look. It was like a movie. Occasionally, something's probably happened to you that was just like a movie. Well, this was just like a movie. And they all stop and they look at me. But I noticed something about every single one of them. I'll tell you in a moment. So they said, we've got a big problem with these big monitors, and you know about graphics, a little bit about big monitors. And they're just all looking like helpless because now that each of them had gotten, and it all came in at the same time the day before, now that each of them had gotten these huge monitors, they said, but they're all flickering. Is there something wrong with all of them? Do you see a flicker? And I said, no, I don't. They said, well, what could possibly be the problem? Is it sitting that close to it? They were very close. And I look around at all these young ladies, and I said, I tell you what, I'm still standing there. I haven't even gotten 2 words out, right? And I said, everybody turn back to your monitor and work a little bit more. So they all turned back to their monitor. I said, now on the count of 3, everybody stop chewing gum. Boom. Their monitor flicker problem was gone. Well, you can imagine the way they treated me. Oh man, this is worth the entire thing, because they had all this hardware there, powerful computers, big monitors, and I'd solved it in 2 seconds. It just occurred to me that everybody was chewing, and maybe that there was something about I don't know, about the frequency between the two, whatever. So, oh yeah, and that sure had, oh boy, now they were really able to sell me at various places. So, a couple more little stories, and I'll let you go. So I'm working in this outfit called GTE SpaceNet. It's different now. And what they were doing is they were selling to the world, to other governments, something called a VSAT, a very small aperture terminal. It was kind of like larger than let's say a dish network satellite dish on top. It's much bigger than that, about 6 feet wide. But at the time, that was very small, a very small aperture terminal. And their idea was that they had satellites, SpaceNet, that they had launched, and they wanted countries, all over Europe especially, to buy into this system so that they could send information back and forth to each other on a secure network. When I first came here, they said, do you want to move to any other place? Because we're going to be shutting down some of the things here in Washington, D.C. My main job was saying that. And it was perfect timing because they were shutting down a lot of the people who understood the Middle East, which was perfect timing just before 2001. And so that's when I moved out here. And for a while, I was on a secure satellite connection and giving advice about trend analysis and pattern recognition, which we do now for this show. And so I was working with them, and they were selling these things to these various countries. Well, they had heard that I was supposed to be this guy that knows a lot of stuff. And they said, listen, there's something missing out of our sales techniques here. We can show them the very small aperture terminals, the VSATs, and we can talk to them about the possibilities and show them, but what we really need to show them is the big picture, like an entire map of Norway, or all of Sweden, or a big map of Germany with like 12 different little VSATs on there. Do you think that you can do a graphical user interface that would show Germany, and then make it so that if you type something in, that the proper terminal will come up? It's a simulation of what our final product would look like. And I said, yes, I think I can do that. Well, we want you to use this software. And boy, they had the dog of a program. What an awful thing that they bought, but they insisted that I use that. So it took me like a week to figure out how to use this stupid program. I mean, there's much better ways to do it. So all that I did was I would have this map of the whole country, and then zoom in on a part of it, and then zoom back out, and then zoom in on another part, and marry them together in a way so that you typed the commands that they had on the real SpaceNet program, and it would look exactly the same. with all the mountains and the fjords and whatever. Yes, I can do that. So I worked out that for them, and they said, this is terrific. We're going to make you, this is the vagaries of life. Why in the world? We're going to make you the final stop. You're our closer. I'm the closer? What we want is we want big monitors. We want big monitors in the room. And we want on each of the big monitors a different country, including the United States. But we want to be sitting right next to you, the operator of the system. We want yours to be just of Norway, the people that we've just had come in. You will be the final stop. You will be the closer. You will be representative of all the technology behind this, which we're not going to show them because that's in another town. We're here in Northern Virginia, and we wish to show them what we have here. We can introduce them to some technicians. We can show them the hardware. We can talk to them about the kind of things that they can transmit, and we can show them their country all hooked up, but we can't show them everything else because also those guys are not social. You're social. You can talk with them. And we're not asking you to pretend like you are a developer, but if they happen to come to that conclusion, that's on them. Okay. So I said, now I've got these monitors that I bought because I was making some pretty good money. And I bought these really big monitors because I got them at a really terrific price. And I've got 6 of them. And they said, oh, that's perfect. And I said, so do you want to buy them from me? Oh, no. We don't have the cash. We don't have the capital in our budget. Well, they had plenty of money, but they just didn't have it for this project at all. This was their lead project for the whole company. But we can rent them. You can rent them, right? But we can't buy them. Okay. Now, what am I going to say? This is ridiculous. So I rented them 6 large monitors. It was at their insistence. And I said, what price do you? This outfit, I decided to treat it always as if they were going to make the price completely on their own. Just a small break. When I did a graphic opening, for the main PBS station in Washington D.C. Not WNET, but it's not coming to me at the moment. It'll come to me a little later after the show probably. I just walked in the door cold. I didn't know anybody there. But I was feeling like taking a risk at that moment. Okay, it's a side, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I walk in the door cold, and I asked to see the promotions manager. And I walk in, and I'm standing in his office. I've just walked in the door. Yes, who are you? I'm Dale Matthews. Hello, sir. He doesn't know me. And I said, doesn't it seem like it's about time to have another opening for WETA? A new opening, that bumper, that thing that comes in between the shows. And he said, yeah. It is about time. Talk about luck. And he said, so do you have an idea? I've just walked in the door. And I didn't talk to him that way. I've just walked in the door. I'm still standing there. He doesn't even know me. He probably doesn't even remember my name as I walked in the door. And I said, yes, this is one thing I know how to do. And I said, well, how about if it did this and it did that? And then the star then goes through the A on WETA and hits against the screen and breaks into all kinds of tiny kind of things. He says, I love this idea. I swear to you, this is exactly what happened. And he says, I love this idea. How much will it cost us? Well, you can't hesitate. What would you say? And I said, well, I didn't hesitate. I'm hesitating now for you, just for dramatic drama. So I said, well, that'll cost you $20,000. He didn't blink. I said, half up front, half upon completion. He doesn't know me. Half up front, half upon completion. Now, you may not want to believe this, but I swear to you, as he is my witness, I walked out of there with a $10,000 check. That's crazy. That's crazy. But as I've learned, if you carry a clipboard, you can walk around just about any place and people will let you through the door. There's just something about a little bit of confidence in a clipboard. I didn't even have a clipboard with me, but there's just something about the way you carry yourself. No one's ever asked me about my education. Nobody's ever asked me about my education, but there's something about the way that I talk or the things that I say that people assume I've had some kind of education. Okay. So I actually had to fly out to LA to have some work done, to get it done quickly. And I told them it was going to take me a couple of weeks. I had it done in a couple of days. Okay, so I'm a little bit of a liar about that. But I wanted to get that thing done. I wanted to get it done and completely okay and no questions about it. And I waited a few more days and then called them and they came over. And they looked at this thing and it did exactly what I said it was going to do. I learned a lesson when I was out in LA. The main guy that did the graphics for this at this point, and they were doing all kinds of graphics for Spielberg films and stuff like that. And it cost me $10,000 to get that work done, but I was going to charge them 20. And because it was a rush job also, you know, there's plenty of people in line for this stuff. And so the main guy that did the programming, they said, would you like to see the guy that's going to do the graphics? I said, sure. He was over there on the floor with bright blue hair. Don't judge a book by its cover. I don't care if he has hair. I don't care if he's all hair. He did a terrific job. And I walked out of that place the same day, got back on the plane, went back to Washington, D.C., and was completely ready for these guys days early. So the guy from WTA, there's a point to this story, if there's a point to anything. Maybe there's no point. What do you care? As long as you're enjoying yourself. So the guy walks in, and he looks at it, and he says, well, that's terrific. But, you know, we're really going to need to show this to our audience and see what they think about it. And I said, well, I'm hoping they'll like it. Well, I'm hoping they are too, but then we'll pay you the second half after. No. You're not leaving this place. I was very nice to it, but you're not leaving this place with this video. Half up front, half upon completion. And he gives me this long, steady look, and he reaches in his pocket and pulls out the second check for $10,000. I kid you not. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. It's nutty. I got to be lying to you, but I'm not. And he gave that to me. They walked out the door, and for a couple of years, that was their bumper. No longer, of course, because, you know, graphics have from real graphic geniuses have moved ahead. So, okay. So I'm working with these guys at SpaceNet. So that's why I told you the $20,000 job. That's crazy. That's stupid. But nobody knew what to price things at. Nobody knew. I didn't think it is anything bad that he said yes to it immediately because I didn't know. He didn't know. Nobody knew what to charge. We were knocking the pants off of our competition because we didn't have to charge anything. Not really. Well, at that job I did, but there was all kinds of stuff that we could do graphically given enough time. We could put that thing out, and if we didn't want to make any profit because we were doing it for strategic reasons, we could. And we stole business from every company in town. We underpriced them because we, you know, my partner and I, we could do it. She was a young lady that was, you know, that had been an artist and was teaching her how to draw with this bar of soap mouse kind of thing. And, you know, we could put this out in no time. And it was costing us nothing, basically, except for the box that we had. So anyway, so now I'm back at SpaceNet. And the guy says to me, you know, how much will it cost? And I said, why don't you tell me? Because I don't know what the prices should be for this kind of stuff. What do you rent monitors for? And he said, well, we're going to pay you $500 a week per monitor. There's 6 monitors. That's $3,000 a week. You have to think I'm making it up, but I am not. $500 a week per monitor because it was looking so good to them. People were it's a stupid price. People were impressed by such things. They thought these were more powerful computers. They really did. And it was universal, even from IT people, information technology, the computer guys. So I brought those in. He says, but we need to have them immediately. So they did. And within a couple of days, I had the first country ready. Well, actually, I had several countries ready, but the rest of them were not programmed to respond to responses. They were just the maps. So these guys from Norway walk in. And remember, I'm the last stop before they ink the deal. If there was any questions about whether they were going to do it or not, I was supposed to settle those questions by being encouraging to them and showing them what a wonderful graphical user interface this was. These guys from Norway walk in, the first thing they do is they see all these big monitors with all these countries, and they go, wow, what a computer setup. I'm all by myself in this room. I'm on the top floor, all by myself. Wonderful view out the window. Nobody's looking out the window. They're looking at these monitors, and they come over and sit down next to me. I'm 25. I've always looked, because of my hair, it's so fine, I always look like I comb my hair with a balloon. So I had a little bit of, and you've noticed that sometimes it just sticks out on the side or whatever. I got a little bit of that Einstein crazy look to my hair. It's not my fault. It was my parents. And so I looked a little disheveled, although, I dressed up for them. And I would always study. I would ask the lead person, what's his hometown? It's whatever, Omslo. Okay. So I would look up a little bit, and I would try to get a little bit of regionalism into my hello. I could just say hello or goodbye, really. But I learned a little bit of that at Voice of America. Just enough. Dobry den, как вы поживаете? I could say to the Russians, right? Okay, whatever. And nothing to the French. Don't ever try. So I would say something to this guy, and I would pick his hometown. No matter how small that hometown was, there was going to be a VSAT there. And I would say something to this guy. Now, if you're speaking to somebody in Germany and they're from Berlin, you would say, ja, ja, ein bisschen. Yes, yes, a little. If they're not from there, if they're from, let's say, Bavaria, or especially from Munich, that's not what you say. What you say is, yo, yo, ein bissel. What? Even the Germans make fun of their southern neighbors. Does that sound familiar? And so instead of saying, ja, ja, ein bisschen, you say, yo, yo, ein bissel. And they loved that because I knew a little bit about them and their own regionalisms. Okay. That worked nicely. I just threw that in on my own, a little value added. Okay. So I would have the guy's hometown. He would sit next to me. Now, I arranged this program in such a way that once you typed in something, when you type in the commands, no matter what you type, if you can't type or you can't spell, it doesn't matter, because no matter what you type, the proper thing would come out on the screen. So, the fat, lazy dog rolls over doesn't matter. It's still going to come out exactly what you meant to type. So that made things easier. And I'm using that goofy program that they gave me. So the guy would sit down and he'd do a little bit of this, and I do a little bit of this. I say, why don't you do a little? And he'd do a little. Oh, this is an easy program to use. I say, it's just a simulation. Yeah, but it's easy. Okay. I was never dishonest with them. And then I'd call up something else, and then I'd call up his hometown. And universally, they were like, oh, so Trondheim. I don't know Trondheim from Diesel Motor, but yes, there's his hometown. And there's the little VSAT. And we'd talk a little bit, and the sales guys would hang back. They knew, hang back. We'd talk, and well, this and this and this and this. And I would always answer to the best of my ability. And if I couldn't, I wouldn't. I would just say, I don't know, but our sales guys do. They would always leave there beaming because they had gotten a chance to talk with the graphical expert. And so I was golden, partly because of the extra little thing I added on with, having the guy's hometown. They didn't think about that. And also because, well, the big monitors were there, which made me look big, I guess, apparently. And also because, the little phrases or whatever I used. But they always left there great, and they would ink a deal. I was making a ton of money. Then they came up to the idea that, and this is another good thing, that they might have to make changes just before the presentation, like the day before. And they said, we understand that you spent so much time on this that making changes could be expensive. They said, well, I'll tell you what, and I always leave this up to them. I didn't do the 20 deal with them. Anytime we make a change, we will pay you $1,350 for every change. I try never to put my hand over my face when they'd say such things. They were making a ton of money off of this, buddy. And they weren't selling to the federal government. They were selling to other governments. I'm okay with that. So I said, okay. They made the deal. And so sometimes they would have 4 changes. I don't know what that is, but that's a lot of money. That's crazy. But they were happy. They were deliriously happy. And so we had all kinds of countries from Europe show up, at this thing, and they would try to give me advance notice of at least a couple of days. There were a number of times where, 4th of July, and I'm inside and I'm sleeping on the floor and I'm doing it all night because the next day there's going to be somebody there, and there's a change that's needed or whatever. And so that's what I delivered to them. That ended because they brought in a brand new guy, a new vice president. And he looked at this operation, and the first thing he said, I was told later, was, this guy's making more money than I am. He was a new vice president. He lasted there only about a week, but just long enough to say, this is ridiculous. My secretary could do this kind of graphics. Well, there was a couple more added into that, but okay. And so at his insistence, they said goodbye to me. The last people that came to visit me on my last day there were from China. They were Taiwanese, which were not incorporated into the mainland China yet. And when they walked in the door, I had spent $500 out of my own pocket on speculation, hoping I would get paid back on a tea set. Now, just think about this for a second. These people had been there all day. No one had offered them a drink of tea. I'm the final stop before inking the thing. I didn't know that, but I wanted to be sure that we had an exquisite tea set and that was ready for them when they walked in the door, buddy. Now, the first thing that the Japanese do and many Chinese do is they bow to you and they offer you a card. And when these guys walked up, it doesn't mean all Chinese do that, but I think all Japanese businessmen do, but not all Chinese. I was, I understood that could be the case. It could be the case. In this case, it was. And they came in, they bowed to me, and they offered me a card. And the sales guy with them said, well, we won't be having him give you a card because we don't want to lose him. And they looked at this guy like, are you insane? That was their culture. And they hadn't had any tea all day. And they were very appreciative of the fact that there was tea and a little bit of cakes. And they could tell the difference between some, dollar store tea set and what was there. I mean, these cups were so translucent that you could see light through them. They were eggshell teacups. So They walked out of there, and one of the guys slipped me his card, and he said, "If you are no longer working here at some time in the future, you call me." I don't know why, because they really couldn't use a graphical genius, probably, but they just liked the fact that I was treating customers in the right way. And then very shortly thereafter, I really didn't have, and I didn't think it was proper to, and maybe you think I'm crazy, to play off of that for the next deal. Because although they had not treated me correctly, I had gotten my connection through them, and I felt a little reticent about. I'm a capitalist, but I'm a little reticent about following through on something. And there's a possibility that they could. Who knows what they told them about why I was no longer there? I don't know, and I didn't want to get into the big hassle with that. So, and I certainly didn't want to move to China. Okay, sorry, don't want to do that. So, um, that was quite an experience to see the place where all that money is going, and the way that people are deceiving themselves about what's valuable or what's not. And then the things that they're skipping over, that they seem to have no idea what the value is of it. And I never did understand that. So I'll tell you two more quick little things, one having to do with China and the other with France. And the French one you already know. So one of the things that where we think that we know what we're doing, but we don't know what we're doing, and that's not always the case. But one of the things that just tickled me was at the National Zoo. You've probably heard this story. And the Chinese had given as a gift to our government a couple of pandas. Pandas were super popular at the National Zoo. But they had a problem with these pandas, is they were not reproducing at all. They just weren't. Something somewhat similar had happened with the Japanese, that they'd given us a bunch of cherry blossom trees that surround the ellipse. And the Japanese happened to send just the right people after so many years of afterwards, and they didn't realize, that Japanese didn't, that we had cherry blossoms that had long since gone, left, were no longer in Japan, and they were happy to get some cuttings to take them back. Okay, so anyway, they were astounded that we had these. They just didn't know. So here we've got these pandas, and the pandas are not reproducing. I mean, he seems willing, but she doesn't really want to do anything at all. And one of the things I noticed while I was there is they had this little loudspeaker thing where see, they don't make much noise, and it's just mostly her saying, "No, I'm not in the mood. No, I'm not in the mood," and they're speaking in Chinese or whatever. Anyway, you press this button, it goes, "Ew, ew, ew," and this must have been going off, easy, no exaggeration, 10,000 times a day. From people come in, the kids pressing it more than once, and all these people crowding into the National Zoo. So they asked for some Chinese guys to come by, communist Chinese guys, and explain to them why they think, to see them there, why, because they'd send them videotapes, but apparently that just wasn't so, to see live. And as soon as they arrived, kind of like me walking to the door with the chewing gum, he said, "Are you insane?" It's like, "Oh, what?" "Well, this recording, you didn't get that from us." "No, we didn't. We got it from National Geographic." "Do you know what's happening in this recording?" 10,000 times a day? That's a signal of distress, like jaguars are attacking and eating us alive. So the male panda saying to the female, "Come on, I'm in the mood." She says, "What's the matter with you? Our neighbors are getting eaten alive." "Well, come on, let's get it on anyway." "No, absolutely no." I love that story. It's a true story. So then the final one. I'm showing up at Voice of America and I'm rolling back a little bit, at 9 o'clock in the morning. You've heard this story. And there's a little place just outside there, a little French place, that's selling all kinds of croissants. There's these things, and they're made in the shape of like a half moon, and they're very popular started being very popular in Spain. And it was a celebration of the fact that the Islamic horde, way back hundreds of years ago, had been pushed back and didn't take over Spain. Well, they came pretty close, didn't they? Because you can see a lot of the Moorish influence and other people. They pushed them back, and so they started baking these things in the shape of a crescent, right? And it was very popular in France as well. And they made them out of ham at this place, and you get cheese, whatever. But the favorite kind was made out of chocolate croissants. So when I would arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning, I would make it a habit to stop there and try to get some. And there was usually only 2 or 3 of them available. Really. And you could see there was a big bunch that had been made, but there's only 2 or 3 left. And they were good, sometimes a little broken apart, because they're the ones that are left over. And so I'd buy them up, and that they would have none. 9 o'clock. And I asked the guy, he says, oh, yeah, they're super popular. We just can't make enough of them. Okay. So after a few months, I'm arriving at 8 o'clock. It's a new schedule. I'm arriving at 8 o'clock. And just a moment, please. I'm arriving at 8 o'clock. And they have 2 or 3 croissants. I say to the guy, deja vu, right? He knew what I meant. And I said, so what's up with this? He said, since you first asked, these things have become more popular than ever. And we made twice as many, and now we're making 3 times as many, and we're still selling out. There's only 2 or 3 left, and sometimes none. And it's an hour earlier. Wow, okay. Another couple of months goes by, and I'm arriving at 7 o'clock. There's no croissants at all. And I said to the guy, what's up with now no croissants? And he said, yeah, we stopped making those. I said, what? He said, yeah, well, so many people were disappointed. So many people were disappointed by no chocolate croissants that we just stopped making them because we were disappointing more people than we were serving. I said, are you crazy? Open up a store that sells nothing but chocolate croissants. Make 10 times as many. What do you care as long as you're selling all of them? Well, just it was such a hassle. So if at some point in the future you think there are some things around here that just don't seem to make much sense, brother, that's all over the place. And those are some of the little lessons I picked up. I hope that you kind of enjoyed a slight difference in the way that things, on the show tonight. I couldn't do this show with Mike. He would be bored with all my personal reminiscence. I hope that you found some of them a little bit laughable and maybe explain a little bit about where I'm coming from, graphical genius that I am. Yeah, right. When I turned down that job, that ability, that opportunity to falsify the government records, I never ended up with any kind of permanent job with the government, and I aced myself out of retirement. No PERS for me. Okay, but I didn't even have to think about it twice. Good night, and have a good tomorrow. Now, if I can find that button, where the heck is that button? I want to say good night. Come on. Oh, there it is. Thanks. Bye.